Thomas Pringle.
Thank you, Lascan Corda. And I would like to welcome the opportunity to contribute to the debate this evening on the mortgage arrears. And I'd like to commend Deputy Donnelly for the work he's done in presenting this PMB to us before the House this evening. Minister, it's ironic that the spring economic statement was debated today in this House with talks of €1.5 billion in wiggle room available for the upcoming budget. While on this side of the House we are talking about families still struggling to keep their homes. These people have no wiggle room because the banks won't allow it. Currently, in my constituency of Donegal, the situation is quite grim for homeowners. There are 271 repossession cases before the courts in Donegal, and 15% of homeowners are in serious mortgage arrears, according to the Central Bank. Although the PMB welcomes the recent reductions in total mortgage arrears levels, we must be wary of the Central Bank's warning that the rate of house repossession in Ireland is likely to ramp up significantly in the coming months, with new figures showing nearly half of the proposed solutions for distressed borrowers involve the loss of properties. Therefore, I support this PMB because it brings in solutions now, not later. And like many other PMBs that have come before this one, it offers a borrower-focused solution to the mortgage crisis. And that has been the primary problem with any of the solutions presented by the government. Their policies are not borrower-centred, they are bank-centred, which force the stakeholders involved and the borrower to ultimately heed to the demands and wishes of the banks. The range of policies seen over the lifetime of this government attempting to address the mortgage crisis include the Insolvency Service, Code of Conduct on Mortgage Arrears, Mortgage to Rent Scheme, reduction in bankruptcy term, and the Central Bank's mortgage arrears targets. Some were positive attempts to tackle the overwhelming mortgage crisis, but executed in typically bad form, while others were clearly bank-centred with no room for the borrowers to negotiate. While believing the government is far too late in addressing the mortgage crisis and had ignored warnings given within this House of an impending crisis, I also believe that by shifting policy direction towards the borrower, the homeowner, the family, we can work towards unravelling the damage already done. This PMB is calling on the government to act in a multi-pronged approach through funding mechanisms, introduction of legislation, amending previous legislation, and introducing new schemes and reviews of current practices. We must turn around completely in the opposite direction, undo the damage done by the previous policies and implement better ones, this time with the homeowner at its centre. I wish to bring to the attention the PMB's policy objectives which reflect that turnaround. These include the minimising of socio-economic harm, avoiding repossessions when it's a family home, ensuring the dignity of all parties and equity in the resolution of unsustainable debts, ensuring sustainability is at the heart of procedures, and avoiding rehousing as a solution, and ensuring that adequate advice and representation is provided for borrowers. The last point is particularly important. This has been a consistent complaint on behalf of homeowners, especially under circumstances where they cannot afford effective advice or representation throughout the process. If we look closely at the current policies in place, we see how bank-centred they are. The Insolvency Service was established in 2013, and when analysed, the figures for deals done in 2014 showed that nearly half, 448, were not deals at all, but bankruptcies, and a further 230 were arrangements relating to debts below €20,000. There were 199 personal insolvency arrangements, including property, and 98 debt settlement arrangements on unsecured debt. So how do we make this system more borrower-friendly? We need to get rid of the bank's veto power to force them to engage with their customers. The Mortgage to Rent scheme has also been a bank-centred and has failed to provide a last resort to prevent repossession by saving the Exchequer from funding families who have lost their homes. Because the bank controls the process and other stakeholders managing it have to take advice from the banks, the scheme was doomed to fail, and so it has. Just 2 cases have been completed in the North West since the scheme's launch in 2012, neither of them in Donegal, and nationwide the figure is a shocking number of only 88. The Code of Conduct of Mortgage Arrears has also proved contentious. Currently, no bank has been sanctioned over breaches of the Code, which is incredible as the Code is statutory and many housing authorities have insisted that breaches have been made. If those in arrears are declared by their lender to be uncooperative under the Code, the borrowers can lose all their protections, up to the point of having their homes repossessed. This is an incredibly imbalanced relationship between lender and borrower. The bank has far too strong a hold. How can a borrower compete with this amount of authority? How can I trust that the law will be on their side if not one lender has been sanctioned for breaches that are obviously occurring? The picture is very clear. Significant profiteering is taking place on the backs of very vulnerable people who are struggling to meet their mortgage payments and struggling through this recession. Much has been made over recent months of the banks returning to profitability. But the debate has exposed how this has happened, namely by screwing people on variable rate mortgages. We see the facade that is the banks having returned to profitability, which has happened on the backs of vulnerable people who are struggling to keep roofs over their heads. This government has allowed that to happen and has lain down before the banks at every opportunity to allow them to continue to ride roughshod over citizens of this society. You need to act and act now. More than 300,000 families are on variable rate mortgages with interest rates of up to 4.5%, while the banks are borrowing money at between 1.1 and 1.5%. And if we look at if all those 300,000 people were paying an extra €6,000 per year interest compared with what they'd be paying if they had reasonable rates in their mortgages, it would contribute more than $1.8 billion in profits to the banks. And that's what we have, the picture where the banks are fueling the recovery on the backs of distressed mortgage holders and people who are struggling every day to meet their repayments. And you have to act now and stop lying down before the banks and bending over for them every time they demand it.